Hey there team, today we're going to have a look at creating an animation controller inside of UE4. We're just going to use the third person character template, so if you make a new project and set it to third person blueprint, then you will arrive at the same setup that I have right here, where I have my third person character in scene and no other extra things loaded. So the first thing we want to do is navigate to the top layer of the content browser. I do that just by clicking on content, and I'm going to make a new folder for my animations and my rig. So I'm just going to call that characters, and inside of here I'm going to make another folder for hag. I'm using hag rig. And inside of here, another new folder just for his animations, just to keep them separate. And then I need to import all of my content. So I'll bring the rig in first, and there we are. So I'll bring that in, and there's a few settings that you should check. The defaults should be fine, but it's always worth checking. I need to make sure that skeletal mesh and import mesh are ticked on. We don't need to change anything in the skeleton area because he will be the skeleton. And we don't need to import any animations. We'll bring them in separate. So once that's all ready, we click import and get ready to receive some error messages. There we are. Okay, so the rig is now in. If I just double click on one of these, then I can have a look. This is the mesh that I've brought in here. If I just click on one of these tabs up here, I can change it to the skeleton, and I'll select one of the joints, move it, see that he's working fine, and now I know that he is good to go. So that's him in. Now we want to bring his animations in. So I have idle, a walk, a run, an attack, and the three separate parts of a jump: jump start, jump loop, and the jump end. Okay, so here we are with our import settings. We don't need the mesh, so we'll take that off. And we will set here that we are going to reference our hag rig. And everything else should be fine. So I'll import and await some more error messages. Okay, our animations look like they are in. Let's grab his idle and just check. Okay, he's idling fine. It's always worth checking your animations just to make sure that they've come in okay. Okay, so there's our fight idle for hag rig. So they have come in okay, so we can go back up. And now we need to start making some blueprints for our character. So if I right click in here and go to the animation tab, I'm going to make an animation blueprint. And I'm going to attach this to hag rig skeleton. And let's rename this hag rig BP, BP short for blueprint. I'll also set up his blend space in here too. So same thing, right click, go to animation, and then we want a blend space. I'll do a 1D. I'm only doing the idle to walk to run. And again, we'll reference his skeleton. So this will be hag rig blend space. Cool. And let's open that up and feed in some animations. So let's chuck his idle far left. So when he's at speed 0, he is idling. And let's get his run and put it far right. So when he's at full speed, he'll be running. So I'm just going to hold down Shift and navigate over here, and you can see him slowly transition from idle into run. But also you'll see that if I put it halfway, he's kind of walking, but he's not walking because he's using a walk cycle. He's using because he's halfway towards being running, and it looks a little bit funky. So we'll put his walk in, and it should help smooth this transition. So now we have idle into walk, and then as he picks up speed, he starts to run. I say run, it's definitely more like a jog with Hagrid. But he's good, he's all nice and ready to go, so we can save that and close that down. Now we'll open up the Hagrid BP and have a look at what is happening in here. So we have two tabs here, the event graph and the anim graph. The anim graph is where we'll make our state machine, and that will handle the general logic of transitioning between an idle state, for instance, into a jump state, and then how to transition back into that idle state. So let's first create a state machine. So with our state machine created, and we can plug that into our end result. I'll rename this to locomotion. You can make several state machines. I'm only going to make one. So locomotion might not be the best name for it because it's going to have an attack in there, but we're doing it. And you'll see if I click in here, it's absolutely empty. Has no other things to attach to. It only has the entry point. And this is basically the very start of any movement. And if I click and drag this out, it will ask me only two things, a conduit or a state. We're only dealing with states here. And the very first state that Hagrid wants to enter into is an idle state. But his idle is going to be a blend between idle, walk, and run. So we will name it idle/run so that it's fitting. If I double click into there, again, it doesn't have anything in it, but we know that we're going to want that blend space we created. So if I bring that in and attach that to our boy, then we have the start of our state machine. I will come back in here and attach some variables, but we'll build his state machine first. Okay, so from his idle, he can also go into a jump, but we're going to split the jump into 3 parts. And the first bit is the jump start. From his jump start, he can go into his falling state or jump loop. So this is the period after he's jumped and he's in the air and waves his arms around until he lands on the ground. And when he does land on the ground, we need a state for that. Which apparently it doesn't want to add. Okay, I'll just add it manually. And rename this to jump end. And drag this arrow to here. And then after the jump has ended, we can return to idle. Now we've set no logic up and we've attached no animations or anything in here. So let's start putting our animations in. So jump start we want. So we just literally drag in from our asset browser and plug that up like so. And go back out and do the same for jump loop. or falling as it's named here. So that now we have all of the animations in and the base logic set up. I'll also make a state for attacking as well. And plug in his punch. Oh, or click on it. There we are. Okay. So that's the beginnings of our state machine. At the minute we have no variables, so this is kind of empty logic. So we need to make a few variables. I'll just compile and save this quickly. So let's make variables. Let's make our attacking. So we want it to check, is he attacking? So I write is attacking. We also want it to check if he is in air. So I have is in air. And I'm also going to go and create a speed variable, but this one I will change to a green type instead of a red type. Now the difference is the red ones are booleans, which is a off or on or a 0 or 1 type. And the speed isn't 0 or 1, it's any number in between. So I'm going to turn that to a float, so it can float between any number in between, say 1 and 400. So with it selected, I can come over here and just change its type to a float. Excellent. Now we have our variables, we can start actually adding them in. Let's drag in speed and just simply get speed. So all we're doing here is telling Unreal to find the speed of the character and plug that into the blend space, which plugs into our final animation pose. Now we can start looking at some of this logic. So with our first one here, we want to do a check to see if we are in air. So if he is in air, he can enter the transition, which makes him jump. For this transition, after he has done his jump start, he wants to go into jump loop. So again, is he in air? Yes, he is still in air, in which case he can now enter the jump loop. While he's in the air, we want to know if he's still in the air, and if the answer is no, he's not in the air, then he can enter jump landing. So for this we need something slightly different. Now we need a not Boolean. So is he in air? No. In which case he can progress on to the next stage. And then for the jump end, again, having some difficulty with UE4 today for some reason. Let's get a not Boolean the old school way. So here's our basic logic. Is he in air? No, then he can enter the transition. We're going to come back and change this later. But for now, that's our basic setup. One thing we need to add is something to bring the animation back into this falling animation. So he jumps, he enters into his falling, and we want him to remain in falling until he lands, which is fine when he's jumping on a flat surface. But if he's jumping off something, the distance is greater than what the jump was originally intended for. Therefore, we need to make that falling animation loop. So we'll add an extra connection in here, going back from jump end to jump loop. So now we want to know if he is still in air, and if he is still in air, then he is going back to his jump loop. So these two transitions, if he's in air, he's going back to jump loop. If he's not in the air, then he progresses to jump end. And at jump end, if he's not in air, he enters the transition once more. We might as well do his punch animation while we're here. So is he attacking? Yes, he is attacking. Therefore, he can play the attack animation. Compile, save. It thinks everything's okay, but everything is not okay because we haven't done anything in the event graph yet. Okay, so now we can start with the messy stuff. So first thing we need to do is drag off from here and look for is valid. This starts our whole chain of events, and it's really crucial. I never remember what this is called, so I always just write it down somewhere. And we also want to have this guy here, the pawn owner. Click in here so that it knows what object it's referencing. And we also want this to come into our velocity. So get velocity. And we also want it to affect the movement capsule. So let's also get that, the movement component, sorry. Okay, getting there. Now we want this to set our air position. So set is in air. And that will be referencing this fella here, who is looking for a node called is falling within UE4. It's impossible to keep all of this tidy, but I try. Now this value will feed into the air value setting, whether or not it's in the air. Now from here, we want a vector length. There we are. And this will feed into our final speed node, as will this fella here. Tidy enough, I guess. I'm also going to add a comment here so I can keep it all in one nice tidy area. There we are. So that's our basic locomotion setup. I'll compile that and save it now. And if I get that out of the way, we can test this now. But first we have to replace this model here, the UE4 mannequin, with our own Hagrig model. So to do that, I need to go back up to my content, the highest level, and look for my third person blueprints and find the original player character blueprint. That's this guy here. And if I click in the viewport tab over here, I can find mesh. And you can see it's referencing the mannequin. I'm going to change that so it references our boy. He's also a bit tiny. So let's scale him up. And we always do a quick check to make sure it's using an animation blueprint, which it is. But it's referencing no class. We want it to reference Hagrid's very own blueprint that we created. So we look for that. There he is. Compile, save, and let's have a little look. There we are. He is idling, and he's also running and jumping. He's working rather well. I may have made him a little bit too big. He's working fine. Now we can go back in and have a look at our logic within our state machine and edit this somewhat. We can start to put in delays now if we want. It's actually working quite nicely, but something I quite like to do is having a delay between this jump end and the idle, or not a delay, sorry, a check to see how much time is remaining on the animation. So why don't I just demonstrate? Get relevant anim time remaining. So what this does is it checks how much time is remaining on the animation before allowing it to go into a transition. So the animation for jump end basically is Hagrid landing on the ground and having a bit of overshoot while he takes the weight of the impact. So we can have it check to see if there's any time of that left, and if there is more or less than a certain amount left, then it either can or can't enter the transition. So let's have a less than. So it can only enter the transition for idle if there is less than 0.4 seconds remaining on the animation. I can delete them out now. Compile, save, and play. Okay, so now it's making sure it plays the entirety of that animation before it transitions back into running. Excellent. So at this point, we have him idling, walking, running, although you don't actually see the walk because we're not using a gamepad, we're just using WASD. But we have those set up. We have the logic there for the attacking, and we have the animation, but we don't actually have any kind of key press. So I need to go in and tell Unreal that I would like a key press, and I would like that key press to attach to some of our game logic. So to do that, I need to go into the project settings and add a new input. So if I go to engine and then input, you can see down here jump and reset VR, although I've actually already created it by accident. So I'll start it again. So I want to add a new action mapping. So I click that and I'll call it punch. and I will assign that. I can assign it to many things here, but I want to assign it to a key press, and I want that to be E. So when I press E, it will trigger the state known as punch. Excellent. Okay, so now we're going to add in the attack action, and to do that we need to go into our third person blueprint and get the third person character. And from here we can call the key press that we just added. So it was called punch. So now we have an input action event. And we need this to cast to our character. I think first off, I'm going to make a comment. Call this attack and group everything together in one nice big bubble. I say nice big bubble. I'll try and keep it tidy. So when the button is pressed, we want it to look for Hagrig. So we're going to cast to our Hagrig. And this will be seeing whether or not it's attacking. So this will go set for our, did I call it punch or attack? I called it attack. So now we can set whether or not he is attacking. We do want him to be attacking. And we also, quite importantly, need to take this object off. And we want to get an anim instance of our mesh. I say I'll try and keep it tidy, and as soon as I start adding things, it gets messy. Okay, so now we press the button, it looks for Hagrig, Hagrig finds his mesh, it sets him as attacking. We also want to add a button press delay in so that while you're spamming E, he's not getting halfway through his animation and breaking. So we're going to bring this out to a delay, so he is successfully attacked. And now we want a delay before you can press it again. And then we will pull him out and set our attack. Apparently we won't. There we are. And we'll leave this off. And then we will just hook up all of these connections to the Hagrig cast. Everything okay. Compile and save. And then just check to see if this is working. There we are, we now have an attack. To take this further and develop it. Oh, wait a second, I've got stuck. There is a slight issue here, and I imagine that's within our state machine. Haha, yeah. So I forgot to add a transition back into idle. So he was permanently punching like a Viking warrior. So now we need to tell it that when he is not attacking, he can go back into idle. Compile and save and play and test once again. Okay, now he merely shakes. Of course, we didn't set our delay to anything other than the default, which is 0.2, which clearly isn't long enough for him to do his punch, so now we need to change this. 1 would probably be fine, but I'm going to try 0.8 and just see if that will do us well. Compile, save, play once again, and punch. There we are. We can run and punch and run again and jump and punch. Excellent. Oh, and he did an uppercut. How did he uppercut? Kind of an uppercut after he's jumped. Huh. Interesting. There we are. They are the basic setups required for most of the things that you're likely to need in Unreal. You can always take this a stage further and start to add in more complex logic around your blueprints, changing these rules up, adding more connections. But for the basics, this should have us fine. Cool. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Take care.